say day-o, daylight come and me want to go.
Hello, Internet, and welcome to the channel. So like many of you, I remember hearing about the rumors of a Beetlejuice sequel for decades at this point. And obviously, sequels often don't live up to the originals, but really up until the last few years, that idea didn't sound like the worst thing ever, you know? But then the remake nostalgia trends took hold, and we've all been traumatized since, with even the slightest whisper of a studio licking their chops to obtain a license. When the Beetlejuice announcement was official, with Jenna Ortega starring, I don't have any issue with her. I've never had any issue with her as an actor or person. But I think just naturally I was like, oh, well, yet another one cast to the fire of corporate gain. But then I saw it and, I was left feeling both entertained, but also very puzzled about how I actually felt about the film. On one hand, it's a really good time and honestly entertained me throughout the entirety of it all. But that being said, there are significant pacing and character issues that are too obvious to ignore. I've trusted the writers in the past and feel that they know how to adapt established properties, and I think the overarching story does show that. But it's a little convoluted, and many of the conflicts are resolved in a matter of seconds in ways that seem too convenient. And while I think it's not really truly offensive, it's not quite the same as when I was 6 years old watching the TV-recorded version of Beetlejuice. Sure, it was edited for TV, but the only thing I remember being replaced or taken out entirely, was just the nice fucking model line. Everything else remained intact. And sometimes when I watch it as an adult, the images and ideas and feelings, they really haven't changed from when I was a kid. They're just filtered through like a different lens. The original Beetlejuice is literally one of my most cherished films from my childhood. And its ability to stay timeless is a huge, glaring failure on much of what is being created these days. It's the kind of magic that just isn't standard anymore. Sure, not every movie hit that peak, but they all seem to strive for it. And the treasure trove of dark family movies only gets more diverse and interesting the more decades you look back on. If I had kids, I don't know if I could take my young child to see Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, as it's not really made for families with young kids. This version is for families who have all grown up. So in that way, I do actually appreciate the sequel, because all of us who loved it are now grown with their own kids. Family films like what Pixar used to create or the Spielberg style, they were all able to capture that holy four quadrants, but others went even further, I think, and somehow were able to craft legit horror stories for all ages. But they were also lessons that buried deep beneath the psyche that the world is not easy, and while things are tough and scary, you can overcome anything. It really felt like the creators wanted to showcase challenges that aren't easy and will scare you, but you must face them. I feel incredibly lucky to have been there as a child, and equally devastated that it doesn't feel like the same sense of peril is even allowed to be addressed in today's films. Isn't it kind of ironic nowadays we try and protect the youth by making their life harder for them by protecting them? Like, what are we even doing? I feel like life's already hard enough for everyone. It's kind of a joke we took away the only one truly benign thing that I can only speak for myself, but could give kids some dose of reality without actually tearing away their innocence. But I also think, streaming has taken away a lot of this magic, mainly due to the platforms just needing content. And when we're talking about like dark stories with families in mind, really the closest thing that comes to the old days is probably Stranger Things. I had an interesting upbringing that lines up with the changing landscape where some stuff, even for kids, was either deemed too much or like sacrilegious in our house. But for some reason, while we didn't grow up with like the Goonies, we had the witches. And while we didn't have the Dark Crystal, I still remember the first time I saw Gremlins. And I remember how much that film imprinted onto my brain that movies could be this fun and exciting. Just those 4 movies alone are exactly what I'm talking about. Obviously, there are others like The Never-Ending Story, Little Monsters, and even something like Casper included dark themes that were meant to challenge the youth of the audience. Also, ILM fucking killed it in that. It seems like some parents
Cough, cough, not mine.
def contributed to this sanitization of our current landscape due to being protective. And I think the changing of the rating system certainly made things more complex. These movies exist in a world where PG-13 didn't need to be a thing because parental guidance was standard until it got to more mature content, which even back then, many parents brought their kids to see those films. And maybe that was good, maybe that was bad, but I am envious as fuck that my mom and her brother were taken to see The Exorcist as children. So, maybe my mom's overprotectiveness had a reason. I don't know, maybe. But these days, it's like the youth isn't even allowed to be challenged intellectually at all. And did all of this actually help anything? And this brings me to kind of the essential point here of like dark themes in family movies and shows, they actually serve a crucial role. They help kids process fear, understand complex emotions, and navigate the challenges of growing up. In the 90s, shows like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark were instrumental in this regard. They showed other kids, facing their fears and coming out stronger on the other side. These shows didn't coddle their audience. They treated them as capable of handling spooky stories and, by extension, the fears in their own lives. They created a safe space to confront fear in a controlled environment, something that's sorely lacking in much of today's family entertainment. Clearly, the 80s did such a great job that we look back on it so fondly, but even fucking Disney knew this shit. Sure, they made all the fairy tales into like feel-good animations, happy ending kind of shit. Dark, challenging themes were presented. From the donkey transformation in Pinocchio, Fantasia, Night on Bald Mountain, to the entire premise of Nightmare Before Christmas. And even Disney Channel had its own share of scary shows and movies made for young audiences. And surprise, surprise, they were forced to stop playing them due to parental outrage. Sadly, the closest examples made in modern times are really only two films, and they're both from 2009. One did it almost to perfection, while the other might have actually went a bit too dark. I rewatched Coraline in theaters this past August in their remastered re-release, and yeah, it's just as amazing still, like even more so in a theater. It was fucking awesome. It's dark, it's allegoric, and most importantly, accessible to all ages while still telling a beautifully crafted story. It honestly feels like one of the last of its kind, and I am still really hopeful that we'll get to see something like that made again someday. The other is Where the Wild Things Are. And while I enjoy that movie, it's really way too grim. It's like really, really dark. They went for that super hardcore, realistic shit that it's just not as accessible. I think that's really what it comes down to. I like the direction that Spike Jonze went with it, and it works if you're looking to be depressed and sad with that modern small glimmer of hope, but it just didn't capture the fun and whimsy of the book. And it came out right at the start of the times when movies were really starting to feel like apathetic and cynical. However, I still give it tremendous amount of credit for trying, because you could see how much they were going for with something like that. And while it's realistic and its emotional themes, it's really missing the heart and the fun needed to actually elevate the message of hope and resilience. Because without that, it's just sad. It's just so sad. So what are we left with? What are we doing anymore? The decline of like darker themes in family films is really more than just about the changing tastes in the landscapes. It's really a shift in how we view children and their capacity to handle complex emotions. When we sanitize these stories, we're robbing kids of the opportunity to face their fears in a safe, controlled way. The dark family films and shows of the past understood that children need these stories to help them navigate the world. They need to see that it's okay to be scared, that danger is real, but that they can overcome it. So I think it's about time we stop underestimating our audiences, both young and old. We need to bring back the dark, the challenging, and the complex in family entertainment, but not just because it makes for better stories, but because it makes for a better, more resilient future of children.